All right, we're recording. So Poso, everybody, I just wanted to say thank you for coming, giving up some of your time to join the Learning Collab. For those of you that don't know me, Poso, Natamatamo, Natakyam, Wapashi, and Totem, Kayas Mamachi To, Komat Nomanewak, and Anishinaabe Koyandao. My English name is Kristen Welch. I'm a Menominee descendant, Irish, German, and a little bit of Scandinavian. I work with the Indigenous-led nonprofit Menikanakim, and I'm the lead organizer for the MMIW Women's Leadership Cohort. So part of the work that we wanted to do in that cohort was to build our skills in grassroots movements and understanding some of the issues around MMIW. And we're really fortunate to have a pretty great network of people like Dr. Joe here, who's willing to share their information so that we can grow and strengthen our movements, our grassroots movements around MMIW. So I just wanted to say that much, and we'll let Dr. Joe introduce himself.
Hi, good afternoon.
Data guy, but trying to be formal.
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Joseph Robertson. I'm an enrolled member of the Sisseton Wahpeton Oyate of the Lake Traverse Reservation. I live here in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. I am a Dakota citizen of my nation, and I have been working with Menikanakim for a number of months now. And so we've had a pretty good momentum going until the COVID-19 virus came. So we've had to kind of switch gears and do some more strategic planning through this process. So that seems to be, I just was listening in and everyone was talking about how things have kind of changed. So I definitely am with everyone in that having to transition to something like this is a little different when you're doing grassroots work. So hopefully we can have some meaningful discussions about some of the topics that we're going to talk about today. And so anyway, I have just a set of slides. I also, if I wanted to demonstrate some of the stuff about, I basically want to talk about the work that I do in my company and the work I do in data sovereignty. And I've got a short, small exercise for people to do here in a little while. But I've got just some slides, some PowerPoint slides that I'd like to share with you. And then you can kind of listen in and then just be thinking of any kind of questions that you might have about this process. I've been working really hard with I'll just go over that in the PowerPoint, but the people that I'm working with here in South Dakota at the Braveheart Society and Menikanakim and Native Organizers Alliance, a lot of the work that we're doing on the grassroots, data has started to really come into play, and how do we put that into the perspective and create meaningful solutions and to really think about how do we form collectives using this data sovereignty idea. So, but thank you for the invite to come and speak for Menikanakim, and I really appreciate that. If you would allow me, I will share my screen. So can everybody see that okay? Yes? Okay. So let me go over, I've got a couple of different things I wanted to talk about today. So this is just, I created through my doctoral work, this data sovereignty initiative. And what it was an idea for us to, how do we create smart solutions for tribal communities? And so a lot of the work that I did from 2014 until 2018, when I graduated from South Dakota State University, was about how do we actually utilize data in a strategic way for our benefit. So the title of my talk today is The Impact of Data Sovereignty on American Indian Self-Determination, Using Data Science and Developing Grassroots Strategies for MMIW. And so again, my name is Dr. Joseph Robertson. I am the CEO and Chief Data Scientist of Mato Ohitika Analytics, LLC. And I'm here on behalf of Kristen Welch of the Women's MMIW cohort in Maniconicam in Wisconsin. So I'd like to talk a little bit today about, I've got two parts of my talk. The first part, I'd like to just talk about the work that I do with my company. And that is, I'll give you a little bit about who I am, what is the Data Sovereignty Initiative. We'll talk about some topics about data science and data sovereignty and citizen science. There's lots of different interesting topics that form this Data Sovereignty Initiative that I've put together, that I'm working directly with Kristen on. And then we'll just look at some general ideas of the key indicator and key descriptor designs, and then, on figuring out how do we form a smart solution. Part two is going to be just discussing and designing grassroots strategies, basically a discussion about that. I'll describe some current MMIW projects that I'm currently involved in here in South Dakota. There's some topics of interest that we can discuss about. We have an upcoming MMIW task force idea that we're currently discussing, and so that would be some interesting things to get some input from. And then what does a roadmap look like for doing work in MMIW, and then examining, I've got a short data survey that we can look at, and that should just take a couple minutes, but what I really wanted to do was help show everyone how quickly we can collect data and how fast we can get the results back. And if any of you know, I've done a number of projects with my tribe, and we were really still at the paper and pencil type of, just collecting information on paper and pencil, and then just having it sit on shelves for a long time. And so the data stuff that I'm working on here is really designed to help forward a new way of thinking, to make our lives easier. Okay, so like I said, my name is Joseph. I'm an enrolled member of the Sistan-Waptenoyate of the Lake Traverse Reservation. Again, I'm the Chief Data Scientist of Mato Ohitika Analytics. Mato Ohitika is translated as Brave Bear, and that is the given Dakota name of my late father, Creighton, and so I named my company in his honor. And I specialize in designing smart solutions for tribal communities using data science, machine learning, and artificial intelligence research and development. My education background is I have a Doctor of Philosophy, a PhD in Computational Science and Statistics from South Dakota State University. I graduated in May of 2018. I also have a Master's in Science and Statistics, also from South Dakota State. And I was a teacher of record for a number of years. After my Bachelor of Science in Mathematics at Colorado State University, and I served in the Indian school education system here in South Dakota, where I taught at the Crow Creek Middle School, the Lower Brule Community College, and then I also worked as a math coach and an upper level mathematics instructor at the Flandreau Indian School in Flandreau, South Dakota. So let's just go over some basics. So what is the Data Sovereignty Initiative? So essentially, it's a native-centric horizontal governance framework, and it's designed to create smart solutions for tribal communities. And the fundamental reason I've pursued this area is to provide an ethical and cultural and community-based consultancy that's designed by an American Indian for nation building to assist tribal communities with economic development, strategic planning, and data-driven decision-making. So the fundamental goal here is to create a unified system of data analysis, collection, and practice that provide many tribal stakeholders with the nation-building tools rooted in data science to assert data sovereignty. I've got an ongoing project objective, and that is to utilize this horizontal governance framework I've designed using a well-defined key indicators and descriptors to achieve parity with not only cultural aspects, but to pair them with data-driven metrics to produce a strategic act of sovereignty that benefits a tribe's community development efforts through data science. I'm not sure who this quote was from. Maybe it was Vine Deloria, but in one of their essays. But the challenge for us as Indigenous nations was to move beyond the rhetoric of nation building models and find new solutions and tools. And so during my doctoral work, a lot of the work that I did in the education system as a math instructor, there was not a lot of data being collected on students. And so one of the new solutions and tools that I decided to undertake was to learn about statistics and learn about how do we collect our own data for our benefit, because they were really lacking in that, and could we do it with high ethics? So this is just the design of, just kind of a design I created while I was doing my studies about the Data Sovereignty Initiative. So I think some of you have probably seen this. So if we're talking about smart solutions, I mean, a lot of us have probably heard the word smart. And during my studies, I mean, a lot of that rhetoric was going around in the tech sector, you know, a smart solution or smart devices or a smartphone. And one of the primary things that I did in my literature review was looking at the administrative side. So from an administrative perspective, I think some of us have heard about SMART, which is specific, measurable, achievable, responsible, and time-oriented. There's some variations of that, but essentially, how do we form a plan? And, you know, is it specific? Can we measure it? Can we achieve it? Who's going to do the work? And can we do it within a certain amount of time? However, in the field that I work in statistics and data science, the Data Science Initiative perspective is that SMART represents statistics, machine learning, artificial intelligence, research and development, and team building strategies around these ideas. And so there's lots of different ways to go about some of these things, but essentially I'm going to go over some of the key points of how this data science idea revolves around these ideas. So essentially what we've got here, here's just a really simple diagram to look about. A data domain is basically is an idea of what we're currently working on. So if we define a data domain as something that we're studying, such as census or transportation, GIS, maybe our MMIW work, there's a set of
then we'll grill out so we don't have to be all congregated either. Like I'll put food out.
Just want to mute the mic, please.
Okay. So we've got these key indicators that actually are part of the design here. So we're gonna take cultural aspects, and we're gonna take data-driven and scientific aspects, and what we're trying to do is build something that we can utilize to create an outcome. So essentially, the data sovereignty has two sets of key indicators. Two are cultural, and two are scientific. So the first two revolve around understanding our tribal communities and our culture, and also about our tribal governance. And the third, and fourth are about designing systems of data collection for the things we're trying to solve. And the data management piece is, how do we collect information? How do we collect data? How do we store it? How do we do all of these things and make it as and to have this data for the benefit of our community? So through this process, I've just created some just very simple slides to just represent the types of things that we work on. And Kristen and I have been working on a lot of this just collectively. This is just the idea, and there's when you're putting together the ideas, it's just good to just be able to visualize things in a way where you can see the cultural key indicators are about us looking at, not all tribes are the same, And we shouldn't assume any of that. And that when I'm a guest on the Menominee Reservation, in the Menominee Nation, okay, I have to honor what they do as cultural practice. And that certainly plays into how we make decisions about the things that are okay for their community, but maybe different for mine. And then the scientific, we want to bridge. We're trying to keep these things mutually exclusive. Again, we don't want to interfere with the cultural practices of our communities when we're trying to create these solutions. And so the scientific, these data domains and the data management, these are the other things that we're trying to strategically place into a position where we're finding harmony between these things. And then the interdisciplinary ideas are behind data science, which drives the process that we're doing here. And citizen science is a way for someone like myself to help teach you as the community about how these processes work and how to undertake this work, and that it's not as scary as you might think it is, but it just takes a little bit of training and a little bit of laying groundwork to make these things easier to understand. So here are the core concepts that when I worked on my PhD work was really trying to establish some fundamental things about how do we undertake, for instance, if we're here to discuss stuffs about the MMIW task force, and what does a task force look like? How do we motivate people to understand what MMIW is? And so one of the key ideas behind this is around nation building. And this is a definition that came from the Harvard Project from the University of Arizona. There's a lot of research that's been done about native nation building strategies. And so one of their definitions was in developing a nation's capacity to make timely. So what is nation building? It involves developing a nation's capacity to make timely, strategically informed decisions about its affairs and to implement those decisions. It involves a comprehensive effort to rebuild societies that work. So in other words, a nation building approach understands that tribes are not merely interest groups, but governing nations confronting classic problems of human societies. And again, what we're trying to put together in this collective is that it's not just about us as Native people. It's also about we need to have a collective of other people that are non-Indian, that are in government, that are in other places, and how do we do this in a good way where we're sticking to these ideas of nation building and collaboration. I have essentially back in 2015, there's this book, and I can put a link at the end here to it, and it's free for anyone to download and read. But one of the origins of data sovereignty came from the university, some of the university system in Australia, and they put together a collection of essays called Indigenous Data Sovereignty. And so this collection of ideas was really about the Indigenous people in Australia and how do you assert Indigenous data sovereignty and how do you define it? What does it look like? How do we look at all of those things? And so when I was doing my doctoral work, a lot of the stuff this was currently kind of was currently being developed while I was working on my work. And so I just wanted to put, this is what the Indigenous data sovereignty in Australia defines data sovereignty as. And the term data sovereignty is uniquely a 21st century expression that arises directly from the explosive growth of information associated with the internet and the spread of mobile phone technology. Quite simply, data sovereignty means managing information in a way that is consistent with the laws, practices, and customs of the nation state in which it is located. Privacy laws, for example, vary from one country to another. In recognition of the variability, data sovereignty means that information that would be illegal to provide in one location might be perfectly legal to disclose in another nation. And so this is kind of just a fundamental idea of how do we look at data sovereignty and managing the data we have for our respective nations, and how do we navigate those ideas that this data could be shared with someone, it may not be, the tribe may want to just assert a sovereignty over that. And so that's what this definition is really getting at. Dr. Stephanie Rainey and Desi Lone Bear Rodriguez, I've met these two. They're part of the U.S. Indigenous Data Sovereignty Network hosted by the Native Nations Institute at the University of Arizona. And they wrote a white paper on understanding what data governance is. And so a lot of these processes, there's a collective of different individuals and different organizations that are doing this, mostly from a policy standpoint. And so what I was working on is, how do we actually measure this? How do we put this stuff into practice? And how do we do this in real time? But couple of the interesting things that they had in their white paper was a couple of these things here I'll read. In the United States, the process of colonization has led to the state of data dependency in Indian country. Federal policies of assimilation, forced removal, relocation, residential schooling, and other cultural ruptures led many tribes to rely on external sources of information about their communities, economic, environmental, and health status. And so this data dependency produces a paradox of scarcity and abundance. Extensive data has been collected about tribes, but rarely by tribes or for tribal use. And so it's a very powerful statement. And so the work that I do in my company is trying to reverse this trend, and that we can collect information for us. And so here's just some talking points they had about this idea of saying that data sovereignty is this aspiration. And these are some of the things that they had come up with about the state of data in our data governance, is that existing indigenous data is inconsistent, inaccurate, or irrelevant to tribal goals. The collection and ownership and application of indigenous data are controlled by external entities. An extensive history of exploitative research and policies have left a legacy of mistrust of data, and a lack of data infrastructure and capability cripples tribal efforts to overcome these obstacles. And so again, understanding all of these things, this is what my company does, is to create these smart solutions that are cost effective and that we can share with other tribes, and creating a digital infrastructure that unifies the data that we look at in Indian country. And so just a couple more definitions, and then we'll kind of start moving towards just what the data sovereignty framework is, and then we'll go to part 2 and just talk about some MMIW stuff. So data science, I'm not sure if anyone's heard of data science, but this is the definition on Wikipedia. Data science is known as a data-driven science, which is an interdisciplinary field of scientific methods, processes, and algorithms and systems to extract knowledge or insights from data in various forms, either structured or unstructured, similar to data mining. And so data science is a concept to unify statistics, data analysis, machine learning, and their related methods in order to understand and analyze actual phenomena with data. And the key word is actual phenomena. So how many times have we said, well, we're gonna do this, or we're gonna do that, and then at the very end we didn't achieve what we were trying to do because maybe we were misguided in trying to understand that the methods we were using maybe didn't actually get us to where we needed to go. And so that's what data science really is about, is to find ways to actually use data to solve real world problems that we're trying to solve. I mean, it's kind of a cliche because that's what we've been doing all along, but this is a formal scientific definition for it. Okay, and while there's not yet a consensus on what constitutes data science, these are basically the 3 things that entail data science: is database management, statistics and machine learning, and then using distributed and parallel systems, which are basically like, how do we use the cloud to do our computations? How do we put things in the cloud? And how do we move things around in that? So those are the 3 branches of what data science entails. And then finally, citizen science refers to the general public engagement in scientific research activities, when citizens actively contribute to the science either with their intellectual efforts or their surrounding knowledge, or with their tools and resources. And again, that's when we come back to this cultural idea that we are the Native people have indigenous knowledge that can contribute to science. And so how do we put that together as a general purpose framework and engagement together, so that we're honoring cultural capital, but we're also creating strong scientific outcomes? And so what are some possible data science related questions? Again, how do we translate data science into the concept of self-determination? How do we empower tribal communities to undertake data science tasks on their own? And how do we unify data platforms across the Indian country? How is this accomplished using nation building? And how important is higher education in using credible research, not only in data analysis, but in our policy decisions? And so again, this may seem like this is a huge undertaking to do, but again, we're just trying to lay the foundation. Kristen and I and Menikanikam are laying the groundwork of trying to help people understand how do grassroots organizers use data in a meaningful way. And so that's really the ideal strategy here. And so again, these are just, I'll just go through these quickly. These are basically our 4 definitions of our key indicators in the data sovereignty idea, because culture matters, sovereignty matters, and we're trying to unify data in Indian country. And so again, here's just another quick picture of the ideas behind. There are 4 key indicators, and then there are 4 key descriptors within this. And so these are the types of things that we're constantly having discussions about whose culture and history and values and citizens are involved in the decision-making processes. And again, in the data collection process, who owns the data? How do we keep it secure? How do we create data collection practices that are good for the organization? And again, all of this tribal governance is about federal Indian law. There's lots of rules and stuff about us that it's really good to know when we're trying to figure out where to go next. And so I'll just go through these quickly. Step 1, what we're trying to do is just do some inductive reasoning. Kristen and I have been doing about the MMIW work, just creating short surveys and meeting with people to just assess kind of the idea of what's important to people right now and where could we go next. Step 2 is to create a diagnostic evaluation of some of these descriptors. Again, if we know something about the community and we know how they're going to react, we create a plan that works in harmony with the community that we serve. And so step 3 then is to create an exploratory analysis. Currently, that's what we're doing right now. I mean, really in real time, all of you that are here listening and visiting with us, we're trying to work on a broader strategy of MMIW and task force and how do we create a learning collaborative? How do we strengthen our own skills by organizing around MMIW and how to think differently and how to do these things in a way where we're teaching each other how to be good grassroots organizers. And finally, developing a tiered set of advanced analyses. That's really what I do. I do a lot of stuff in statistics and machine learning. And maybe at the end, I can show you some of the maps I've been doing with the COVID-19 virus stuff that can show you what it is that I do professionally, as well as doing some of this work here. So again, these are the pictures. This is kind of the final one. This is just kind of a visualization for you to look at. So when we carefully interlock these disciplines, it's what forms a smart solution by integrating cultural, scientific, and interdisciplinary methods of design and consultation. And so we're trying to create harmony between these things. And so that's what, working with Menikanikam right now, that's what we're doing in real time. And so we're trying to create these smart solutions to move forward a grassroots idea in MMIW, food sovereignty. There's a number of different things that we're working together on, but this is just the fundamental idea. So, and so again, here's just some examples of, I worked with a native group in tourism analysis and census, and I'll share a little bit more about the Keystone XL pipeline, the risk assessment that I did. A lot of that comes back to tribal historic preservation, of course, MMIW, COVID-19, higher education, any of these things could be proof of concepts for basically for data sovereignty initiatives. So maybe I'll just stop there for just a moment. So are there any questions or any? there any questions about the process?
When you leave this house to go to work.
Christian, have you started doing some of this stuff in connection with Miniconic collecting data?
Yes, so Joe has been working with us on not just the MMIW, but he did start, I believe, with some food sovereignty stuff and then growing Miniconic as a whole.
And was that through interview or what method did you use?
Do you want to take that one, Joe?
Sure. For the data collection, essentially what we were doing. Well, actually, I can actually show you. Essentially, since I'm a trained statistician, a lot of the data collection came from our kind of consulting together. And what I did was I designed surveys to collect data with Kristen, and so I have a platform that I do that on. And essentially, let me just share with you what that looks like. So essentially, here's something that we're just going to do if you're savvy enough during our conversation, this is kind of what I've done to design surveys for Kristen and Miniconic. And we've done how many have we done? We did an MMIW cohort survey, and we also did something with
I think you did one at the powwow too.
with the powwow, yes, at the end of the year we did something for powwow. So as you can see here, this is basically a way that I'm able to take and design surveys and data collection custom for whatever it is that we want to do. And so a lot of this work that we do, I do directly with Miniconic. So if you have a question you want to ask, we design them custom built for them, and then when the data is collected, it comes into a portal like this, and we can look at information from the portal in real time. And so essentially what that allows us to do is when we take a survey, I have the information done, and then we can create a report. And I think, let me see if I have. Let's see, where was that? Oh, I think that was it. So essentially what happens is, well, if technology will cooperate.
Well, what the good part about working with Joe is he can kind of pick your brain for the outcomes that you're looking for, and he'll help map it out for you. So you don't have to know how to build a survey and put it together, but he'll help
Yes.
talk it through, like what are the outcomes you're looking for, and then he'll give you few different options. Like here's some different ways you can ask that question. It can be sliding scale, it can be yes or no. It depends upon like what is the outcome that you're looking for. And this survey that he was talking about, I think it's the one we did. We had an MMIW panel at CMN, and we wanted to get information from the community about their level of engagement and awareness around MMIW. And if they're not engaged, how could they be engaged? And then we kind of rated that. We gave them different examples. And then if they are engaged, what are they already doing? So that we could work together and we're not, sort of recreating something that somebody's already doing, but really it showed us that more people were willing to get involved in a different area. Like direct action wasn't really their thing, but they did want to do things to create awareness within the community. So that's really good information to have, but that's like something that we've worked on together. That was one of our first surveys that he helped us do for MMIW. And
Yes, let me just show you. Here's just an example of some of the results that we had from our. And so again, when we collect information, we're able to get information about what's happening in real time. And so when we design these things, this is the beauty of having and understanding the technology that we have in front of us and how we can use that to create instant outcomes for the things that we want to do. And so that's kind of what I wanted to do with the second part of our of talking about MMIW. But if you are savvy enough, then I wanted to put this out here right here. Let me grab I'll put this into the chat.
So I think Renee had a question. She said, what do you mean by horizontal governance framework?
So essentially what I mean by that is all the research that was done by the Harvard Project and through the native nation building strategies, essentially they came to the conclusion that like top-down horizontal governance frameworks do not work for tribes. And so the 25 years worth of research that had been done on that was really essentially saying, okay, well, if we can't go all the way to the top to solve these problems. And this data sovereignty initiative idea is really saying, okay, if we can keep a level playing field if I'm working with Kristen horizontally, then we can create strategies that benefit the tribe indirectly or on a level playing field, as opposed to having the idea of gatekeeping is really a really tough thing to overcome sometimes, because what we're really doing is we're asking permission from somebody that has a position in power to either say that it's okay to do this or not, or that. And so part of what my data sovereignty idea is to create an equal level playing field horizontally. So if I'm working with Kristen, I'm also working collectively with Menikanikam in their overall idea of how to use data for grassroots. And then the portfolio piece horizontally is that we're working with that, and that is connected to working with Kristen and Maria with other projects that they're doing within the organization. And so it's not just saying, well, at the highest level, do we need permission from Guy to do some of these things, or are we doing nation building strategies that we're working all together collectively? And I think that's one of the things that I wanted to make sure that everyone understands about this data sovereignty idea, is that we're all part of a collective, and that's what we need to really understand when we're putting these types of things together, right? Everybody may have a different feeling about MMIW, but essentially if we're working towards a common cause, there's a collective that we need to understand about what that means, and how that, and how do we strategically think about, if you want to pass a bill in the Wisconsin legislature, it's going to take more than us just going up and going, well, I care about MMIW, so I think you should pass this law. It's like, it requires all of us to have a stake in how we have these conversations, and what we choose to do and how we choose to do them is part of this scientific process of collecting that data.
Then there was just another comment, if you could somehow make your documents bigger so when you scroll, they could read them.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was just kind of going over some of those things just to kind of generally show. Was there anything that you wanted to see in particular?
No.
What I wanted to do here, just while we're kind of in a transition, and then I'll talk a little bit about the work I'm doing for MMIW. I'm going to put this link into the chat. So I designed what I wanted to do, and again, when people don't understand how quickly we can do certain things in data sovereignty and data science and all these things, as you're sitting at your computer, or you can just use your phone. and you can scan that QR code. I designed just a short survey, and so what I wanted to do is for people to just see how this process works. Is essentially what you'll, if you click on that, while I'm kind of talking about MMIW stuff here in just a minute, this is a little short survey I put together, and that's what the link is. And so again, this is just a short little thing to just, are you a tribal member? You don't, I mean, these are optional, but what I really wanted to do is show you how quickly, if you take this survey, we can access it and look at it. And so again, this is what, these are examples of looking at oh, maybe I can make that bigger. How's that? So if we're doing this task force survey, again, this is a strategy that when Kristen and I were talking about how to form these ideas around a task force and what would people think about that, these are the ideas that we could use to collect information from people that want to be involved in this and that want to have a voice in it. And how do we collect this information? And so again, while I'm talking, I mean, all I need is one person to take it, basically. And so again, what we can do with location analytics, I can go in there, and I'm from Sioux Falls. I'm a tribal member. I'm part of the SWO. And so again, do you have concerns about the state of our Indian communities? Again, this is just kind of this is a way for us to look at some of the things about our communities, and that we can create community booklets to teach people about what's happening in our community. And again, here's the MMIW task force to indicate the strength of need for a strategic plan in order to form the task force that we're going to talk about, right? Is it needed? Is it maybe not needed? Again, these are just, when I design things, these are the things that Kristen or whoever that I work with, we go over these and go, is this a good question we could ask people? Does it give us something meaningful that we would want to know? And so again, if you go through some of these, the other thing I wanted to do, if you're able to do it, is just answering yes or no. Have you heard of any of these concepts? Have you heard of data sovereignty? Have you heard of data science? Have you heard of citizen science? Have you ever heard of machine learning? And so some of these things here are just about that. And so what happens is when I'm done, I submitted it, and then so this tells me that I've got 3 records so far, and we'll go over this at the end. But again, you're going to see there's a see, we've already got information about, we've got instant results from our survey. And so these are the ways that Kristen and I have been working, and I'll get back to the slides now, but if you wanted to fill that out really quickly, we'll look at some of those results here right at the end. So part 2 is really, I wanted to talk about the current ongoing MMIW projects that I've been working on. Here, this right here has been a really important project that I basically, this is how I met Kristen and Maria when they came to visit South Dakota for the National Native Organizers Alliance. They had their yearly training in Lake Andes, South Dakota. And for nearly part of a year, I've been working with Faith Spotted Eagle, who is one of the Coonchie grandmothers of the Braveheart Society, located in Lake Andes, and it's part of the Yankton. She's part of the Yankton Sioux, the Ahontawan Nation of the Yankton Sioux tribe in South Dakota. And so, basically, the proof of concept for this data science stuff is this is the result of one of the things that we've done, and so this is called the Zuya Wichayu Oneha project, which is honoring warrior women. And so this is a cultural risk assessment for harm reduction to Native women and families in the corridor and adjacent to the Keystone XL proposed pipeline, and to prevent any further murdered and missing Indigenous women. And so I've had a huge responsibility to work with Faith and and a lot of the grassroots to put together a risk assessment about the harm that the man camps for the Keystone XL pipeline will have in our communities. And so we were working pretty much nonstop all the way through December, all the way through January to design a cultural risk assessment. And so that's what this is. And I have a quick, so this particular report called the Zuya Project was actually part of the testimony that I gave at the South Dakota Natural Resources, the South Dakota DENR Water Management Board hearings in January. And so what I had done is I had created this community booklet that is the design of the ideas of the project that I help with. Faith, I work with Faith and all the individuals there on the Yankton Reservation, all the women there, of how do we create and so I created an idea around the project overview of this, and then how do we measure police capacity. So essentially what happened was that we had there was a resolution passed in Yankton at the Yankton Sioux Tribe and the Rosebud Sioux Tribe, and they passed a resolution for harm reduction. And so that's what this assessment was about, was to stand united using this risk assessment to help understand that the ideas of MMIW and harm to women and children with the Keystone Pipeline coming through here, if it was approved, that's what we were fighting against for the water permits. And the water permits were actually approved, of course, no surprise there. But when I gave my testimony, this is what I provided to the public about our lack of police capacity. And so this document in itself was really a way for us to look and see. If you look at the Rapid City Police Department, they've basically got one officer for every about a half square mile. And if you look at Yankton, depending on whether you're on trust or not, it could be anywhere between 10 square miles, 69 square miles, or 95 square miles. Or in Rosebud, you're looking at one officer per square mile is about 86 square miles. So if they get called to somewhere, if the pipeline's getting built and there's people from the man camp around, we're in big trouble. And so, but anyway, that's what this particular document that we created was about, community development. And Kristen and I and Guy had worked on one as well for Maniconicam to help promote the things that they're doing in their community. And so again, I had an opportunity to testify at the DENR Water Management Board hearings on January 13th, and that took a long time. They basically stalled, and finally I got to give my testimony. I think I had been there a half a dozen times and we ran out of time. And so I was called to testify as a lay witness on behalf of the Yankton Sioux Tribe to the public interest and beneficial use of water in regard to the multiple water permits TransCanada had applied for to provide water for the proposed man camps. And so this assessment provided some basic evidence of the lack of police capacity near the Yankton and Rosebud reservations to handle the sudden influx of men coming into these camps. And so my testimony was provided on January 13th at the visitor center adjacent to the state capitol at approximately 8:30 in the morning. And this was actually picked up by the Kellenland News Bureau. And here I'll put that. Let me put that in the chat window. And so that I actually got the Capital News Bureau picked up the story about the data, the research that I'd done. So it was a huge victory for us. For the project to help promote this idea of MMIW. And so the two other projects we've been working on is one, of course, with Meniconicam. We've been working with the MMIW women's cohort with Kristen, and then we're going to work on that as far as trying to develop something for this task force. Again, part of the conversation we're trying to have here is that if the state legislature has another session next in January, could we have something to provide them to help promote what this task force should look like. And then there was also this Standing Strong and Protecting Tiny House Tour of Communities of the proposed Keystone XL pipeline route that was postponed due to COVID-19. And that was also with Faith Spotted Eagle. And so essentially what was going to happen is they had a tiny house that was kind of an MMIW tiny house, and they had it equipped with solar and some other stuff. And we were working on going to some of these sites and to create an educational set of just a gathering peaceful gathering to teach people about the dangers of the van camps. And so that's currently on hold. But again, these are the types of ideas that have kind of spawned my inner inner organization collaborative with Kristen and Braveheart Society, and hopefully with some of you as well. And so that in itself was that's kind of what I've been working on, and it's been really valuable work. I think part of the risk assessment is the same. It's no different here with the Keystone XL pipeline. We still need a strategic assessment here for Wisconsin if you're trying to have a task force. And so that's part of, if we've laid the groundwork here in South Dakota, so I can help Meniconicam benefit from that research and development on their side. So some of the things you just wanted to talk about was just how can Meniconicam use data to inform decisions. And so we're doing that. And so our next strategy, I think one of the things we wanted to do was during MMIW Awareness Week was to collect data, to design a survey to teach people about MMIW. And we can't assume that everybody knows what that is. And so we need to go to the basic grassroots level and do an education collective about that. And then we are hoping to maybe go promote that at the Democratic National Convention, and then just write a report about that. And hopefully that could be something we could put together and create a document that represents our perspective on this and how that could relate to the task force that they want to build. And they meaning there's lots of people talking with the DOJ in Wisconsin and Kristen and a number of other individuals that are trying to figure out how do we put all this together that makes sense and that people are represented in a good way. And so that's what we're currently just in the stages of development. And then how can I assist in developing these strategies? Again, we just have to build these things from the ground up. And then how can a MMIW task force collective benefit from these interactions? And again, that's what this is about, is like we're collecting information and gathering intelligence from all of you today, and you're listening and hearing what we're doing. So how does that move us forward in the future? This is one of the things I just have, it's kind of my coin phrase or whatever, but when we're looking at trying to figure out operational data capacity, essentially in Indian country, there's a really lack of that. And I've done a couple of projects with my tribe, the Sistan Waptin Oyate. I worked on their community assessment survey, and I worked on their 2015 census that they did. And there was a lot of lack of capacity there. And that's really what drove me to get my PhD in computational statistics, was that there wasn't any capacity and any representation in that. So that was really something that I'm deeply interested in. And so that's why I'm doing this. But again, operational data capacity is defined as to the extent in which an organization has achieved maturity in data collection, management, and how that data has been used to inform decisions. And so essentially, that's something you just want to ask yourself as an organization. You know, what does that look like? And in Kristen's case, we ask that all the time. It's like, how do we, are we moving towards something where this portfolio has got, do we have things that we can, that are we answering the questions we want to answer? And so finally, just to kind of wrap things up, what does a roadmap look like? One, we want to develop a strategic assessment to look at this collective's operational data capacity. And we want to develop a strategic plan of action to begin this data domain around MMIW. And we can use my data sovereignty framework to leverage data science techniques to achieve some of this stuff. And then step 4, we want to develop a comprehensive plan using data science to create a meaningful task force. I mean, that's essentially what we would like to do more broadly. But again, we have to take small incremental steps and get some successes on the ground level. So let me just. Did I put the survey link in there? No, the survey link is right here.
Yeah, you did put it in there. They're just
Yeah.
asking if we could share it.
Yeah, I mean, and again, one of these things is I was just this was just kind of a an informal thing. But if you'd like to open it up and we could gather some information on it, absolutely. I'll keep it open for a week and then close it, and then we can take a look at that. Mm-hmm. And then again, so part of this is just wanting to be able to show some of you, if you've never seen any of this, how this process works, because it's not necessarily that you need to know all of these difficult things. It's that, can we ask the right questions to get what it is we want to solve? You know, how do we put all these things together that help move MMIW into something that was maybe in the shadows a lot, or that didn't have a lot of traction, but then we've built a collective around that, and we've used data to do that. And again, I think one of the main things that we want to always remember is that, I mean, the experiential part of what women have gone through is definitely certainly is a part that is a tough thing to talk about. But what about the other parts of MMIW, of teaching people about, you know, what is MMIW? I mean, if you ask somebody, walk down the street and ask somebody, what is MMIW, could they tell you? And so can we start working towards, instead of leading with our experiences right off, could we form like a general idea of how would we approach this? You know, we couldn't just, it would probably scare somebody in the Republican legislature in Wisconsin if you went up and told them your story. And during the Water Management Board hearings, we had an individual that testified about her being trafficked, and it was absolutely riveting, and it made everybody on that panel very uncomfortable. It accomplished what it needed to accomplish, but at the same time, if we're doing education, you know, there's appropriate times to do those things as well. And so what we're trying to strategically plan is, how do we create a message around that MMIW? Like, just like that little booklet I showed you. Like, could we do a booklet like that would represent all of you in a collective for the MMIW task force in Wisconsin? So any questions?
Well, I think it would be good to get some feedback from this group about the survey we're trying to develop for the webinar. Maybe some additional questions that they would like to see on there.
Right. In fact, today's exercise was just kind of for whoever was in here. But what we could do is, if you wanted to provide some extra questions that you wanted to ask, and then we could do a different survey to help inform the decisions for that task force meeting coming up in a few weeks. Let's do that instead.
Yeah.
because I think the survey that I had was just basically to show, was just a general thing to show everyone that it's really easy to collect information and that we can do it in real time. So are there any questions?
Are your minds blown?
Hi again, this is Renee. I'm really impressed, Joe, with your company, with your philosophy. Very impressed with this, and my mind is indeed blown because I'm running through how many different ways I'm going to get my tribe engaged with you. And so really wonderful. Kristen, thank you for bringing him to my attention. This is wonderful.
Yeah, I suppose I could share my Joe the Data Guy with everybody.
Yeah, well, thank you. And it's a great opportunity. I mean, it really is for me to work directly with our communities. That's really what I designed my company to do. And so that's, you know, I'm really, it's an honor for me to be able to put my education to work for us. But if there's no more comments, let me just show you some of the results of that little survey, and then I'll just close with having you look at some of the maps that I've done for the COVID-19, if you'd like to look and see some of the stuff that I've been doing. So here.
So, excuse me, Dr. Joe.
Yes.
I didn't want to interrupt, but I just wanted to ask about kind of the collection of. I started taking your survey while you were talking, and one of the things I think is necessary is that first we understand from a data-driven perspective what our situations are in our respective tribal communities, and then share that the ability to share that information across tribes, and then, you know, kind of ground swell up, and then be able to data mine and drive into what are the factors so that we can stop it, you know, and it's before it happens. And I think that that's where I just want to kind of well, so one are the challenges, the whatever data structure challenges of being able to do that. But what I would kind of nominate you to kind of, and I don't know how to do this, but you know, the whatever the bar, you know, USAG, he's done he designated 11 states where it's official that they're doing this. And I think that it would be good for you to like get involved with whoever these states are.
Yes, I think as some of this grassroots stuff starts to really develop into something that's a little bit more mature, people are going to start to notice. And I'm in a really good position as one of the only native data science startup companies that, you know, we work on that I have a skill set that's unique to Indian country, and that at some point, of course, I'd love to be part of that. And I think one of the first steps is to see what happens with our work with the DOJ here in Wisconsin, and how do we start building those partnerships? Because I think you're right. I mean, we can't just say, well, we're Native people and we don't want anything to do with our government. I mean, part of it is that we do have to try and work on strategies and strategic planning to help people benefit from that. If, you know, not everyone not everyone everywhere doesn't want to be part of MMIW or part of a movement or a grassroots movement. It's that we need to create opportunities for people to get involved in that because it means something to people. And that's part of what my strategic planning and this data, if we start collecting data, eventually we're going to have a portfolio that shows different things. And you're right. I hope that at some point we'll get noticed. But again, we have to do this through the grassroots, because my company is grassroots. I'm just the underdog. I'm trying to build machine learning algorithms to help a machine do a lot of the work that I need to do, so I can focus on doing these types of strategies. So, but thank you for the comment. That's certainly one of my bigger goals, is to have representation more nationwide about this. But again, we have to have a well-crafted message, a brand, and an identity, and who are all the players in that. And I think one of the questions in that data science exercise I had you take was about the MMIW stuff. Was, I think, what was it? It was
The strategic messaging and plan.
Yep. What do we need? What's the strength of need for an MMIW strategic plan? And so what does that look like? I mean, if we never conceived it, we need your help to figure that out, right? We need to go through this in a way that we iteratively look at what's happening now, and then we collect this data, and then we move towards the stuff for the DOJ webinar. What information did we gather today that'll help inform our decisions next time? And if we keep doing that, and we have places we have these data points that show where we made our decisions and how we learned about this, I can tell you, it's nothing short of amazing when people can say, we have the survey results right here. This is what people want to see and do. And to put that into a document that you can share with the community. That's what we lack right now, is to be able to put these reports and give them to people in the community to actually, so they can read them and learn about them and go, oh, I want to be part of that.
Yeah, what you're doing is great.
Well, I thank you, and we'll be working more together every day. And apparently more on Zoom.
Thank you.
But if you'll just indulge me one last time, I have this survey right here, and what we'll do is so again, if I went back to the overview, let's see how many people hopefully this is going to cooperate. And if it doesn't, I'll have something else in the wings here. Okay, so and again, so when we're looking at this, you can see that there's, we had 4 people take the survey, and again, this is a data panel that allows us to just look at information we collect. And so again, if this is part of Meniconicam's portfolio, we can do this right inside their organization. So they have this information directly at their fingertips. So one of the things that it does is it will analyze things in real time first. And again, part of this is that it just gives us just some results about, do you have concerns? Yes, no. And so we've got these instant results. And here's one of the interesting parts, here's the word cloud. Let's begin. Improve jurisdiction issues. If you wanted to think about designing a smart solution around the MMIW task force, indicate the strength and need. I mean, again, part of this was just to show you that the minute that we have this information, we can use it for whatever it is that we want. Are you interested in being the lead organizer? Yes or no? I'm not sure. Have you ever heard of data sovereignty? I mean, all these things. And so anyway, that this part was just to show you just some results of that. And then here is, this is the data page. If it'll come up. Well, what that is, well, that's loading up. Let me just, one of the things that I've done on my website is, if you haven't seen, I've been doing some work on the COVID-19 pandemic. And so I've created a space-time cube to look at special things with the COVID virus. And I wanted to show you one of the things that I've been working on. And so here's essentially what so going by county with the COVID-19 virus, this is essentially, this was last Thursday, and this shows you the trends of confirmed cases by county in all of the United States. And so part of what I was trying to understand is, in Indian country, there's lots of risk associated with this stuff. And I'm gonna be posting these maps probably later on this week. I've got a whole time series from March until now. But I think one of the things that I really, that is quite shocking is, here's what it looked like a month ago.
Wow. Wow.
This was on March 8th. This is what it looked like. And here's what it looks like. Here's what it looked like 2 weeks ago. And then that's what it looks like last week.
Wow.
And so again, some of the work that I've just been doing on in this avenue was just to look at overall the US and looking at where are the emerging hotspots in our communities. And so this is a map of showing, this is the real-time data. I basically wrote some code to pull the data straight from the Johns Hopkins University, where they post the data in USA Facts. I wrote a script to pull this data so I could create these maps. And so you can just see there's some of the areas that, like in the Northeast, you can see that there are places where the COVID virus, every time there's confirmed cases, we can statistically measure where some of those things are happening. And so one of the ways that I did that is then I broke it down into Midwest. And so you can look at Chicago, there's Chicago and Detroit. There's where one of the original hotspots was. It was around Seattle. And then here's down in Southern California. Again, there's always emerging hotspots pretty much every week. And there's the South. And so one of the interesting parts of all of this was that, again, this is no different than doing a strategic plan for MMIW. I needed to have a plan to use the data that was coming out from, this is public data that's being released by our government. And it's one of the most amazing times to be able to look at, we can make things like this to help inform all of you. This was what it looked like. This is what it looked like.
Wow.
Like 6 weeks ago. And so that shows where the trends were, the positive trends of the confirmed cases, and that's where it is now. So if you're thinking about, if you're thinking about governors that are opening up the US, I mean, this doesn't tell us how many cases there are. This just shows us that they're, according to these, this is a 99% confidence interval that says that there's definitely there's been an increase over time, and there's a continuing increase in cases over time. These are the confirmed cases. And so, but anyway, this is some of the work that I do above and beyond just doing the work that I'm doing with Kristen, is that a lot of this different types of work that I'm skilled at is also to help. If this can help save some lives or something, then I'm all for it. And so, but anyway, so then I've got just an analysis on my website at bravebearanalytics.com. And so I'm going to be publishing these maps here in the next few days. And then of course our data portal isn't working, so I'll just quit there. But just any other questions or comments? I really appreciate your time tonight, and I hope you got something out of it. And Kristen and I are definitely looking forward to having some other conversations moving forward about how to do the MMIW stuff.
One of the questions is, do you have a recent map like that for MMIW?
I don't. In fact, that's one of the things that we need to talk about, and that's what I'd eventually like to be able to have, is to code the GIS data that is available into something like that. That could be a map that's part of the risk assessment. And so, how would we do that? And again, that's where us as a collective, somebody knows where to find some of that information, or maybe DOJ. You know, again, part of the collective here is to manage the data in responsible ways, where if we can get some of this information, if tribes aren't going to give it up, but we can develop strategy maps about MMIW, then we can make maps like that. And certainly you can see that I know how to do that. And that would be a valuable thing to have, to start these conversations.
One thing I was going to say, Joe, one of the biggest gaps that we're finding in MMIW in our states and all the states across the country is a lack of data in general about women that are missing, that we haven't collected data, or we aren't keeping it in a place where it's easily found. So part of this strategy is to look at exactly how much data is missing. And I know in my county in particular, I sit on the criminal justice committee, and the county chooses not to include any racial data in any of its data that they collect, and that's a conscious choice. And so that really impacts, like, when we talk about reentry rates, we talk about arrest rates. If there's no data collecting, whether they're tribal member or non-tribal member, you know, it's from the beginning, the onset, that we're lacking all of this information. So I know one of the areas that the tribes are really in moving forward is talking about the lack of data. And that is, you know, one of the probably the legislation moves that we need to make, is that it is going to be required that if there is a missing, it should be, we should know who they are. And if they belong to a tribe, the tribe should be notified of that. So I think that's important to include in the lack of data.
I agree, and I think you're thinking on the right. We're thinking the right way there. Just because there's no data doesn't mean we can't collect data on that, right?
Yes.
And that's a good strategy to think about how to put this in perspective. If people don't know that there's no collecting of that information, then how can you go to the legislature and go, well, you guys should collect data on this, and then they don't. It's more like, how do we create something through this collective that presents that information in a good way that doesn't piss everybody off, and just kind of doesn't, you know, what we're trying to do is build a collective around the idea that if there is lack of data, let's provide something to them that says, this is the reason why we need this information. And that as a group, this is what this is the strategy, is we do need that data, because otherwise it's not gonna work.
I have a question.
Yes.
So is it that, okay, so there's different states, different county type of police and jurisdiction areas. So is it that they're different in how they collect their data, especially when it comes to MMIW data? So how the data would be collected from those jurisdictions, and then how that would be imported into the system that you're using? You understand what I mean? Because there's different ways in how they collect the data. So is there's different ways you have to communicate with this state to get that information from them, and then you get the information from this state from another way. So is there a way to put it together in your system?
Typically what I do is, if there's a way that data has already been structured, I tend to do it the way that, if the government structured it, the data in a certain way, then you always try and do that so you can do apples to apples comparisons. And some of the work that I did on the last project, or the Zuya project, involved working with a non-Indian police department, the Rapid City Police Department, and they were very, very supportive of our MMIW efforts. And so one of the ideas behind the work that we were doing with the police risk assessment was to be able to understand what type of data do police departments have. And they actually use the same systems. And so in fact, it's not that difficult to collect apples to apples data on certain things, and certain police departments have data that's available that that if they're willing to share it, as a matter of a nation building strategy, certainly they've been open to that. To me, if I ever needed something that maybe had to do with MMIW, they'd be more than willing to work with us to give some of that data over to help us with our project. And so, and again, but I was working with their data analyst in Rapid City, and so we can speak the same language. So we know kind of what to say here. This is the data we have. This is how we should structure it, or this is how it's going to come out. And so then so to answer your question, I tend to try and keep everything as structured as where, if it's structured somewhere else that allows us to do comparisons with like the government or the state, then we'll definitely do that. It's not wise to just create something out of the blue that you can't connect.
Right, and I think that was part of like in the strategic plan that we were talking about, is making sure that all of our data and our strategies are interconnected from local to state to federal to global, because we know that MMIW isn't just localized, that we have to be able to share and exchange information across jurisdictions, not just within a state, but across the nation. So I think in our conversations with Wisconsin DOJ, I know Chris McKinney, he's like right under the Attorney General. He wants Joe to connect with their data people so they can start making those comparisons, like what is going on, what are the gaps. So that meeting is coming, but I think that definitely needs to be reiterated in that strategic plan, that data collection has to be able to be, like Joe said, apples to apples comparison across our jurisdictions.
Last thing to tie onto that, the data that's collected from the DOJ, like from the federal level, is that on the same scale as the state and other jurisdictions? Do you know?
From what I understand, it might be the same system, but is probably not on the same scale. Like, I don't think there's as great as communication as we would hope.
And I agree with that, Kristen. And not only that, how each county or each tribe reports and what they report are often in contrary to the DOJ database. So that's why we know the Wisconsin database is flawed, and why we need to look at county and other jurisdiction database and bridge that gap. So so I don't think I think all of the DOJs have similar information, but the information that's fed to each state DOJ is flawed.
And I also think that, Joe, you're really right on point when you talked about data sovereignty, because if we have tribal members off reservation that are missing, many times the tribe is not being fed the information back that you have a tribal member who is missing. So it's not a two-way street when it comes to data. And my fear is, and this is my true fear, is that the data is not even being collected. That if in Bayfield County, if we're not doing racial data, then we definitely don't know whether it's a tribal member or non. And if I just simply don't think the data is there, and that a big part of this moving forward is that a big part of our strategy is to start collecting that data, because if we don't know our numbers really with who was missing and how many murdered we have, it affects the funding in the future we request for. I mean, this is really going to impact so much more of our work that we're going to be doing in the future. But I really think that we're going to find out it's not there, and like we think it is. And I think that is one of the biggest problems that we have right now.
I think just on that, if we're really thinking about it, I think one of the other parts that Kristen and I also discussed was this idea of how do we create preventative measures from this? It's like, if we're trying to prevent MMIW, what data do we need to make that happen? Do we need to do an assessment of the community assessment of that there is lack of data, that we've done a study on that, or that we have recommendations that, I think just part of what my pedigree is in data and statistics is to be able to have a scientist that says, here are my recommendations. There's lack of data in these departments. We're not sure why, but maybe part of that is that we need, in this task force, we need to start working on collecting this information and being able to share it in a certain way, and that the preventative measures are some of the data that we can collect in the intermediary. So how do we, Kristen and I just spoke about how do we take the information that the state has, well, the lack of data that state has, and how do we help them understand that it's better to have preventative measures of MMIW than having the state having to incur costs of the aftermath of that, and that collecting this data would help, and sharing that with tribes might help, and that could be part of that preventative measure, as opposed to after the fact again, well, so-and-so knows who was assaulted or who went missing, or that's always after the fact. I mean, we're trying to figure out how to proactively create a solution before any of that happens, I think. And it's not easy. It's certainly not easy to put those in the perspective, because when it happens, when you see it and happen every day, I mean, in just the last year of working at Braveheart and seeing the stuff that this is a very real thing. And so it's hard to ignore that. If you're seeing it for real, then what's my job? How can I use the skills that I have to help maybe move forward a perspective in which data should we collect, or where do we even start? And so that's where we're at. That's what we're kind of trying to figure out right now. Anything else?
Any more thoughts or questions? Okay, well, I just wanted to say thank you, Joe, for coming and joining the meeting. It's always awesome hearing about your work, having you help us and guide us with the task force here. But I think just overall, like this is the beginning of something really big. So it's really an honor for me to be a part of that, and oh, we got a question. Does Minnesota have a good start? In terms of like the task force or data, or?
That I'm not sure. Again, those are good questions. I think that's part of also this collective, is if we don't know who has the data, then that's again one of the things that we need to work on. It's like who's collecting data and who has it.
I think in terms of the task force, I know Minnesota prior to COVID had already been holding the hearings. I don't know if they've put out reports or recommendations yet based on that information though. I know they had their hearings, quite a few of them already.
Mm. Well, if they had their hearings, don't they have data then probably? I sat in on this jurisdictional meeting earlier in the fall down in Wisconsin Dells with looking at, it was for domestic violence, but the presenter was a lady from Leech Lake or White. She's on the Supreme Court in Minnesota. And she just did the lunch special and, or the lunch talk, and she talked about MMIW and all the strategies that they're using over there. And it sounded pretty good. I haven't been able to check into all of it, but it sounds like they have a good foundation on looking at getting all the people in place, whether the cops, the judges, the prosecutors, the morgues, anybody who has anything to do with the DV situation. I'm done.
Thank you.
Well, that'll certainly be something we can continue having that conversation. Because again, you know, you don't want to reinvent the wheel here. If we have intelligence we can get from other groups, that's certainly the way we should go about it. And the more we increase this network, the better we have. The more likely we have somebody that knows somebody that could get a hold of that person. And again, if we have a strategic plan here, there's nothing to say that somewhere down the line that if this can go bigger than just Wisconsin, that we could go one state over, that somebody would be interested in helping out with the project. And so I think that's how I kind of view this, is that if we create outcomes here, people are going to notice. And so it'll be easier for us, and it'll be easier for me, that if we just do some legwork here to create a strategic plan, and then we find somebody else in the mix that has data or strategies that could help us out, certainly it'd be easy to incorporate that.
Yeah, and I think another thing, Joe, I really appreciate what you're saying, and I think it's very thoughtful. And of course, if other folks have really great starts on collecting this, because I know it's a nationwide problem. I know it's bigger than we all can imagine, and we certainly have a long road ahead of us. But one of the things too is even you know, there's going to be a difference in public law 280 states compared to non, because we really rely on outside folks to supply us with our own data, right? So because our criminal is definitely out of our hands here. And so I think that's even going to be an interesting find once we start comparing public law 280 states compared to non, if they have, we're relying on other folks to give us the data back. And so that's where I really think that, this is really a pretty complex matter that we're all taking on, but I really do appreciate, and I'm really enjoying your conversation today, and you did a great job. And I just want to say, I really like the direction that you and Kristen have started with this, and I think it's a great thought. Really, really enjoyed it.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Oh wait, you can go first.
I just said good job. That's all I wanted to say.
Oh, okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, you did a really good job. Thank you. I was wondering if there's anywhere that I can find your information after this, because I have a friend who is also like interested in data and stuff. He's Justice Pesce, I think. Kahan Tanukas might know him. He's Randy's cousin. But yeah, he's really interested in data collection and stuff. So I feel like he could work with you on some of this stuff.
Let me just copy. Let me see. Let's do this. So look in the chat.
Okay.
That's my company website, and so that's where You can get my email, my number to my company number is there. And so just feel free to reach out. However, or if you need to get a hold of Kristen too, that's fine as well. But again, any ideas that you may have, we're gathering intelligence all the time. Anytime that I do these things, I'm gathering intelligence on behalf of Kristen and on behalf of everyone. So your input definitely matters. So if there's something you'd like to contribute, let me know. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Good evening, guys.
Okay, so I think that'll wrap up our meeting. Thanks again, Joe, for joining us and giving us your awesome data presentation. Thank you everybody for joining. We'll put the recording up on our website along with some of the chat information so that you can go back and review it or share the video or any information that was put into the chat. You'll be able to access that. So as soon as I get my tech skills up and going and get that loaded up to the website, I'll send an email out or let you know through our group that it's ready to be viewed. But with that, I'll see you all, some of you, in our meeting next week when I send that date out shortly. Otherwise, we'll see you again in 1 month for the Learning Collab. Oh, there's Dolly.
Manan, I'm here. Come on, Manan, love you. Thank you, Joe, for your good work. Kristen, always proud of you. Nice to see you, Kata, and nice to meet everybody.
Thanks, Dolly.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Good to
you.
meet all of
Sorry.
you.
Nice to meet you, Joe and Kristen. I'm really sorry about you hearing about my fire plans this weekend. Didn't mean to be on mute. That's going to be on the recording. How embarrassing.
So who knows how far that one's gonna go. We're gonna have a whole bunch of people showing up.
You did notice that we did say 6 feet away, though. We were being very healthy. Sorry about that. Thank you, Joe. You did a good job. Thanks,
All
Kristen.
good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
See you, Joe.
Take care. Bye-bye.